Good morning everyone. Myself Dr. Prajakta from the Department of Pharmacology. Today we will see the cholinergic agonist. I think in previous lecture you have already seen the different aspects and introduction to the autonomic system, the different types of receptors, the different parts of the autonomic system, that is sympathetic, parasympathetic system, the way it functions through its different types of receptors, and the role, their key role in the functioning of body, different functions in the body, human body. So today we will see the cholinergic drugs, that is cholinergic agonist and the anticholinesterases. So firstly we will see the synthesis, storage and release of the acetylcholine. A neurohumoral transmission takes place in 5 steps, that is the synthesis, then the storage and release of the neurotransmitter, then the recognition of these released neurotransmitter by the different types of receptors, and then metabolism and destruction of the neurotransmission, and thus creation of a response by these neurotransmitter in the effector organ. This is the neurohumoral transmission. To start with the synthesis of acetylcholine, we can see that the acetylcholine requires the choline, and this choline is taken up by the nerve end with the help of a sodium cotransporter. That is, the sodium choline cotransporter causes the uptake of choline into the nerve end. Then the acetylcholine is formed with the help of acetylcholine A in the presence of ATP and the choline acetyltransferase enzyme. The synthesized acetylcholine is then transported to the clear vesicles with the help of vesicular transporters. After transport of these acetylcholine into the vesicle, it is stored there. Then with the help of calcium, these vesicles are then transferred to the axonal end. Then after arrival of the nerve impulse, the vesicles move towards the axonal membrane. Binding of these axonal membrane with the vesicular membrane occurs, and by the process known as exocytosis, the stored acetylcholine is released into the synaptic cleft. Now, after release of acetylcholine into the synaptic cleft, these released acetylcholine binds to the different types of receptor present in the postsynaptic membrane, and after binding of these receptors with the acetylcholine, a response is seen into the effector organ. But these released acetylcholine is then hydrolyzed and broken down into choline and acetate by the help of acetylcholinesterase enzyme, and then this choline is further reuptaken by the sodium choline cotransporter for further again synthesis of acetylcholine. Now we have seen the process of synthesis, storage and release of the acetylcholine, and at different sites of synthesis, storage and release, there are different substances which cause inhibition of the process and thus causing the deficiency of these acetylcholine into the synaptic cleft and decrease in response. The choline uptake, which was the first step in the synthesis, is blocked by hemicholinium, which prevents the uptake of choline into the axonal membrane. Further, when the acetylcholine was synthesized, it was uptaken by the vesicular transporters to be stored into the vesicle. These vesicular transporters are blocked by the vesamicol, and it thus prevents the vesicular uptake of acetylcholine. Furthermore, after the arrival of the neuron or the nerve impulse, when the acetylcholine was released by the process of exocytosis, these botulinum toxin inhibits the exocytosis and release of acetylcholine into the synaptic cleft. So these are the different substances or the drugs which affect the synthesis, storage and release of the acetylcholine, leading to deficiency of the acetylcholine into the synaptic cleft. So the acetylcholine, which is locally synthesized in the cholinergic nerve endings, which is released into the synaptic cleft, further acts through the different types of cholinergic receptors. Now, what are the different types of cholinergic receptors? So, there are two types of cholinergic receptors, that is nicotinic and muscarinic receptors. These muscarinic receptors further have different subtypes, that is M1, M2, M3 and M4, M5. These subtype of muscarinic receptors have different types of location, and depending on the location they have different functions. The M1 subtype of muscarinic receptors are located in the gastric ganglia and central nervous system, whereas M2 are located in heart and central nervous system. The M3 type of subreceptors have widespread location, that is in eye, gastrointestinal tract, bladder, bronchus, different types of glands and central nervous system, whereas the M4 and M5 are not that much significant as compared to M1, M2, M3. Both are located in the central nervous system. Another type of cholinergic receptors are the nicotinic receptors, that is NN and NM. The N suffix suggests the location of the nicotinic receptors, that is neuronal ganglia and the adrenal medulla, whereas the NM, that is neuromuscular location of the nicotinic receptors. The released acetylcholine is hydrolyzed by different types of choline esterases enzyme, that is acetylcholine esterase and the butyryl choline esterase. Now we will see individually the different types of muscarinic receptors. These muscarinic receptors are selectively stimulated by muscarine and blocked by atropine, and they have shown a little subtype selectivity of agonist, but the muscarinic antagonists have more subtype selectivity, subtype that is M1, M2, M3, M4, M5. So moving towards the individual muscarinic receptor, the M1 is a primarily neuronal receptor located on the ganglionic cells and central neurons. It plays a major role in mediating the gastric secretion and relaxation of the lower esophageal sphincter caused by the vagal stimulation. It has also shown its role in learning, memory and motor functions. The subtype selectivity of antagonist has shown some antagonists which have selectivity to the different subtypes. So we have found a M1 selective antagonist, that is pyrazine. The next muscarinic receptor is the M2, where the location is in the cardiac muscarinic receptor and are mediating the vagal bradycardia. The autoreceptors on the cholinergic nerve endings are also of M2 subtype, and the smooth muscles also express some M2 receptors, and they also mediate the muscle contraction like that of the M3. The M2 selective antagonist is the trimipramine. Next is the M3 subtype of muscarinic receptor, which is located on the visceral smooth muscle and cause the contraction. Also, it is responsible for the glandular secretions, and along with the M3 receptor mediate the most well recognized muscarinic actions, including that of the contraction of the lower esophageal sphincter. The next nicotinic receptor are the NMN subtype of the nicotinic receptors. The first one is the neuromuscular nicotinic receptor. These are present at the skeletal muscle end plate. They selectively are stimulated by phenyl trimethylammonium and are blocked by tubocurarine. These NM receptors mediate the skeletal muscle contraction. Next is the NN subtype of nicotinic receptor. These are present on ganglionic cells, adrenal medullary cells, and in spinal cord, and in certain areas of brain, which are selectively stimulated by dimethyl phenylpiperazinium and are blocked by hexamethonium. Now, the cholinergic drugs are classified into different types depending upon their action. The cholinergic drugs have the action same as that of acetylcholine, either by acting directly through the cholinergic receptors, that are the cholinergic agonists, or indirectly by increasing the availability of the acetylcholine in the synaptic cleft through the acetylcholine esterase inhibitors. So we have two types of cholinergic drugs, that is cholinergic agonists, which act directly by the cholinergic receptors, and the anticholineesterases, that is which act by inhibiting the acetylcholine esterase enzyme and thus increase the availability of acetylcholine into the synaptic cleft. So we have the directly and indirectly acting cholinergic drugs. In directly acting cholinergic drugs, we have acetylcholine, pilocarpine, bithanacol, methacholine, and carbachol. And the indirectly acting ones are the acetylcholine esterase inhibitors, which are either reversible or irreversible. The reversible ones are either lipid soluble or water soluble. So physostigmine, tacrine, donepezil, rivastigmine, and galantamine are the lipid soluble reversible anticholinesterase inhibitors, and neostigmine, pyridostigmine, edrophonium are the water soluble ones. The irreversibly inhibiting acetylcholine esterases are the organophosphates and carbamates. In organophosphates we have malathion, parathion, chlorpyrifos, ectiophen, and the nerve gases like tabun, serine, and soma. Whereas in carbamates we have the carbaryl, propaxir, and aldicarb. Moving towards the pharmacological actions of this cholinergic agonist. Now, these have the different muscarinic and nicotinic actions mediated through the different types of receptors on the different organs. So, firstly, we will see the cholinergic agonist having muscarinic action on heart. In heart, the parasympathetic system has inhibitory effect on the heart through M2 receptors and is responsible for the negative chronotropic and dromotropic effect. So how it has these type of effect? The action are different on the SA node, AV node, and the Purkinje fibers. Now firstly we will see what does it have its action, or how does it act on the SA node. It causes, that is the acetylcholine causes hyperpolarization of the SA node, that is SA nodal cells, thus reducing the diastolic depolarization, and which thus further decrease the impulse generation and leading to bradycardia. At AV node and Purkinje fibers, these acetylcholine causes increase in refractory period. The refractory period is the period where the arrival of a new impulse generation does not create a response. So thus the increase in refractory period further causes slowed conduction, and because of slowed conduction, the slowing of conduction causes increase in PR interval. The force of contraction of atrial muscles is also decreased. One more thing you have to keep in mind is that the non-uniform vagal innervation in the heart, and because of these non-uniform vagal innervation, the effect on refractory period and conduction of different atrial fibers varies, creating a inhomogeneity, and because of this inhomogeneity there occurs atrial fibrillation and flutter. Next is the effect of cholinergic agonist on the muscarinic actions of blood vessels. So in blood vessels there is no direct cholinergic supply, but the cholinergic M3 type of subreceptors are present on the endothelium of the blood vessels, and the stimulation of these receptors causes release of endothelium derived releasing factor, that is nitric oxide, from the endothelium, and this causes the dilatation, that is vasodilatation, and because of vasodilatation there further occurs a fall in BP. Next is the effect on eye. Cholinergic system stimulates the sphincter pupillae muscles of the eye, causing the circular muscles to contract and leading to miosis through M3 receptors. On the glands, the cholinergic system causes increase in secretion, that is stimulates the secretion of the different types of glands, which results in increased salivation, lacrimation and increased sweating through the M3 type of subreceptors. Now in urinary bladder, these cholinergic drugs stimulate the detrusor muscle and relaxes the trigone, that is the sphincter. Because of contraction of detrusor and relaxation of trigone, there occurs voiding of bladder. So increased micturition is seen, and these actions take place to the M3 subtype of muscarinic receptors. Next is the effect on the gastrointestinal tract. So as we have seen, it causes increase in secretions. The same is seen in the gastrointestinal tract. There is increased hydrochloric acid secretion in the stomach mediated through M1 and M3 receptor, and thus these increase in secretion of hydrochloric acid increases the risk of peptic ulcer. The peristalsis of GIT is also increased, and there occurs relaxation of the sphincters. So these both the actions are responsible for diarrhea and abdominal cramps seen in the cholinergic stimulation. In bronchus, it causes the bronchoconstriction, that is constriction of bronchus through the M3 subtype of receptors. Due to vasodilatation, the cholinergic system is responsible for erection in male sex organ. Now the nicotinic actions of the cholinergic agonist are: in autonomic ganglia, both sympathetic and parasympathetic ganglia are stimulated through NN subtype of receptors, whereas at neuromuscular junction, the acetylcholine stimulates the skeletal muscle contraction by action on neuromuscular receptors. The different types of choline esters are: first we will see the acetylcholine. These acetylcholine is hydrolyzed by both acetyl and butyryl choline esterases. We have previously seen there are two types of choline esterases which are responsible for hydrolysis and breakdown of the acetylcholine. So this acetylcholine is hydrolyzed by both acetyl and butyryl choline esterase, and it is non-selective for its action on both muscarinic and nicotinic receptor. But the important fact why it is not clinically used is its hydrolysis, rapidly hydrolyzed within microseconds by acetylcholinesterase. So even if the IV dose is given, we have no effect of acetylcholine because of the rapid hydrolysis by acetylcholinesterase. The next choline ester is the methacholine, which is hydrolyzed only by acetylcholinesterase, and it has relatively higher affinity for the muscarinic receptors on cardiovascular system. This methacholine is occasionally used for the termination of paroxysmal supraventricular tachycardia. Next are the carbachol and buthanachol. These carbachol and buthanachol are resistant for the hydrolysis by acetylcholinesterase, and they have the higher affinity for the muscarinic receptors present in the gastrointestinal tract and the urinary bladder, and their affinity is responsible for the uses like post-operative or postpartum urinary retention and neurogenic bladder, congenital megacolon, and gastroesophageal reflux disease. The adverse effects of these cholinergic agonists are the colic, which we have seen that increased peristalsis responsible for abdominal colic, involuntary urination and defecation. Because of its increased secretion, there will be increased sweating, vasodilatation will lead to fall in blood pressure, and bronchospasm. The next drug is the pilocarpine. Now what is pilocarpine? This pilocarpine is obtained from the leaves of Pilocarpus microphyllus. Okay. So it is a drug which has prominent muscarinic action. This drug increases all the secretions and have a complex effect on cardiovascular system. Small doses cause decrease in blood pressure, but the larger doses have opposite action because of ganglionic stimulation. The choline esters like acetylcholine, methacholine, carbachol or buthanachol we have already seen, and the alkaloids, that is cholinergic alkaloids which have agonistic action, are like pilocarpine, aerocholine and muscarine. This pilocarpine is applied on the eyes and penetrate the cornea, promptly causing the miosis. Spasm of accommodation, that is ciliary muscle contraction, occurs, and fall in intraocular tension occurs because of the more increase in alignment of the trabecular meshwork. The iridocorneal angle is opened, which leads to the increased trabecular outflow and thus reduction in the intraocular tension. These reduced intraocular tension may last only for 4 to 8 hours. It is used in the dose of 0.5 to 4% of eye drops. So what are the uses of this pilocarpine? It is used in open angle glaucoma because of its action to increase the outflow by opening the angle, increase alignment of trabecular meshwork. Next is to counteract the mydriatics after the refraction testing. Third one is to prevent the adhesion, that is synecdoche of iris with lens on posterior side, or the synecdoche, that is adhesions of cornea with the iris. So by alternating with mydriatics, we can break these adhesions. The side effects are stinging sensation, painful spasm of accommodation. Next, drugs. Now we have seen the cholinergic agonists, which are the directly acting drugs through the cholinergic receptors, and the anticholinesterases are the indirectly acting drugs through increasing the availability of the acetylcholine by inhibiting the acetylcholinesterase enzyme. So these are the agents which inhibit the cholinesterase and protect the acetylcholine from hydrolysis. Now in the process of release of acetylcholine, after release it was hydrolyzed by the acetylcholine esterase in the synaptic cleft into acetate and choline, and these acetylcholine esterase inhibitors prevent the hydrolysis and makes it available for the postsynaptic receptors, and increase in intracellular response is seen. What is the mechanism of action of these acetylcholine esterase inhibitors or anti-acetylcholine esterases? So, the acetylated enzyme reacts with water rapidly and the esteric site is freed in fraction of milliseconds. The other acetylcholine esterase inhibitors like carbamates and phosphates react slowly or not at all with the water, and thus reactivation of the cholinesterase enzyme is slow. The organophosphates attach only to the esteric site, whereas the drugs like tacrine, edrophonium attach to the anionic site. And the significance of these attachment of the drugs at anionic and esteric site will be discussed further in the lecture. Now, the pharmacological actions of acetylcholine esterase inhibitors is that it acts both at muscarinic and nicotinic synapses, and they potentiate the synaptic transmission both in parasympathetic and sympathetic system. So, this we have already seen that the anticholinesterases react with the enzyme, that is choline esterase enzyme, essentially in the same way as that of acetylcholine. They attach to the esteric site, and the acetylated enzyme rapidly has an interaction with water, and the site, that is esteric site, is rapidly freed of the enzyme. In the figure F and E, we can see the carbamylated enzyme. These carbamates attach to the site, and carbamylated enzyme has slow reaction with the water. So, the cholinesterase enzyme is freed or reactivated slowly. And in case of oximes, this we will discuss further when we see the role of oxime in organophosphate poisoning, that is the diagram G and H. So, what are the pharmacological actions? The lipid soluble agents, that is physostigmine and organophosphates, have more marked muscarinic effect. They stimulate the ganglia but have less prominent action on the skeletal muscles, whereas the lipid insoluble agents like neostigmine have marked effect on skeletal muscles, stimulate the ganglia but have less muscarinic effect. They do not penetrate the CNS, and these actions of penetration of CNS have their selective role in different types of diseases. On ganglia, the higher doses causes the persistent depolarization of ganglionic nicotinic receptors and blockade of transmission, whereas in cardiovascular system, the muscarinic action would produce bradycardia and hypotension, but the ganglionic stimulation would tend to increase the heart rate and blood pressure. In skeletal muscles, the higher doses cause persistent depolarization of end plate, resulting in blockade of neuromuscular transmission and weakness and paralysis because of the persistent depolarization. And in central nervous system, the lipophilic one, that is those who penetrate the central nervous system, produce a generalized alerting response. The cognitive function may be improved in Alzheimer's disease. Further, we will see how these drugs have an role in treatment of Alzheimer's disease. So, when we give these anticholinesterases, we have to take certain precautions. Like these drugs are contraindicated in cases of sick sinus or atrioventricular conduction defects, because we have already seen how does it have its effect on SA node, AV node and Purkinje fibers, and the inhomogeneity of the vagal innervation is also responsible for the contraindication of these drugs with the cases of AV conduction defect. These are to be cautiously used in cases of peptic ulcer, asthma, COPD and hypertension, because these drugs have role in increased secretion, so leading to peptic ulcer, so cautiously used in these cases. Responsible for bronchoconstriction, so to be used cautiously in cases of asthma and furthermore. Now the different anticholinesterases like physostigmine and neostigmine. Here we will compare these two drugs and their different actions and selectivity in different types of diseases depending on their chemistry. So this physostigmine is a natural alkaloid obtained from Physostigma venenosum, and the neostigmine is the synthetic one. This physostigmine is a tertiary amine derivative, so it is non-polar, but the neostigmine is a quaternary ammonium compound and is a polar one, so it will not penetrate the central nervous system. Oral absorption is good with the physostigmine, whereas neostigmine is poorly absorbed orally. When applied to eye, the physostigmine penetrates the cornea, whereas the neostigmine does not. The prominent action of physostigmine is on autonomic effectors, whereas the neostigmine has its prominent action on skeletal muscles. And because of these actions, the important uses of these drugs are: physostigmine is preferred in cases of glaucoma, whereas neostigmine is given in cases of myasthenia gravis. And the duration of action of both is near about same. Pilocarpine is given systemically, the action is for 4 to 6 hours, whereas neostigmine has the action for 3 to 4 hours. Now the competitive inhibitors like edrophonium. So edrophonium, tacrin, donepezil, galantamine are non-carbamates, but still they have the action like the carbamates. These edrophonium is a alcohol bearing quaternary ammonium compound and has a very short duration of action. It is rapidly excreted by the kidneys and resembles the neostigmine. It is suitable for diagnosis of myasthenia gravis. How? We will see at how it is responsible for diagnosing the cases of myasthenia gravis. In case of glaucoma, we have the cholinergic drugs as miotics, and we see the drugs decrease the aqueous secretion or increase the aqueous outflow, thus reducing the intraocular tension. So the drugs which increase the aqueous outflow are those which include the trabecular outflow or some which increase the uveoscleral outflow. So the miotics are the ones which increase the trabecular outflow, and we have the pilocarpine and physostigmine which are used in cases of glaucoma. As a miotic, it reverses the mydriatics after refraction testing, we have seen already, and also for breaking the adhesions between the iris and lens and iris and cornea. So these are given alternatively with the mydriatics. Now moving to the another use, that is myasthenia gravis, important disease. So this myasthenia gravis is a autoimmune disorder. The myasthenia gravis is a autoimmune disorder which occurs because of development of antibodies to the nicotinic receptors at the muscle end plate. So because of the development of antibodies to the nicotinic receptors, the number of nicotinic receptors which are free is decreased. The receptors are occupied by the antibodies, and also there occurs the destruction of the nicotinic receptors. So the available free nicotinic receptors are less in number, leading to weakness of muscle. Firstly, the eyelid extraocular and facial and pharyngeal muscles are involved. Later, the limb and respiratory muscles get affected. The neostigmine and its congeners are the first line drugs used to restore the muscle strength. So in this diagram you can see the ocular and the eyelid muscles which are involved, leading to ptosis, weakness of muscles because of the myasthenia gravis. So in this diagram you can clearly differentiate the normal neuromuscular junction and the neuromuscular junction in myasthenia gravis. The acetylcholine receptors on the postsynaptic membrane are free in case of normal NM junction, whereas those in cases of myasthenia gravis are already occupied by the autoantibodies, and because of these occupied receptors there is decreased interaction of the acetylcholine with the free receptors and reduced muscle contraction, leading to weakness of the different muscles. So treatment of myasthenia gravis, it is usually started with neostigmine in the dose of 15 milligrams orally 6 hourly, and you should keep in mind these cholinergic drugs do not have an effect on the basic disorder, that is the antibodies. These only have an effect on the nicotinic receptors. The antibodies are produced in the thymus and the main treatment is the thymectomy. Next is corticosteroids also. So these corticosteroids like prednisolone given in the dose of 30 to 60 milligrams per day induce remission in about 80% of advanced cases. Corticosteroids inhibit the production of antibodies and may sometimes increase the synthesis of new nicotinic receptors, thus helpful in myasthenia gravis. One more treatment modality is the removal of antibodies by plasmapheresis. It is a rapid recovery process, but is the response which we get is a short-lived one. Now, when there is over treatment with anticholinesterases because of overdose, this leads to weakness of the muscles because of the persistent depolarization, and these weakness because of persistent depolarization is the cholinergic weakness. Now here comes the role of edrophonium, which we have already seen as a diagnostic tool for myasthenia gravis. Now when we give edrophonium 2 milligram intravenously and there occurs an improvement in the symptoms, then we can say that the weakness was a myasthenic weakness. But when even after giving edrophonium there is no improvement or occurs a worsening of the symptoms, that is increased weakness, then this weakness is because of cholinergic crisis. Okay, this is how we differentiate the myasthenic weakness from the cholinergic weakness. The cholinergic weakness is because of persistent depolarization. Another use of edrophonium is in the ameliorative test, where the edrophonium is given intravenously 2 milligrams as a test dose. Then if nothing untoward happens, the remaining 8 milligrams is injected after 30 to 60 seconds, and the reversal of weakness, short lasting improvement in the strength of the affected muscles is seen only in case of myasthenia gravis and no other muscular dystrophies. So this is another test to diagnose the myasthenia gravis with the help of edrophonium. Now another uses of cholinergic drugs is the post-operative paralytic ileus and the urinary retention because of the actions of these cholinergic drugs in this selected system. So we give 0.5 to 1 milligram of neostigmine subcutaneously. Another use is the post-operative decurarization, where the neostigmine is given 0.5 to 2 milligrams intravenously, but it is always preceded by either atropine or glycopyrrolate, because these are the drugs which block the muscarinic effect of the neostigmine, and this neostigmine rapidly reverses the muscle paralysis induced by competitive neuromuscular blockers. The next use is the cobra bite, where cobra bite is a curare like neurotoxin. So along with neostigmine, here also we use atropine to block the muscarinic unwanted muscarinic effects of neostigmine. So given along with atropine to prevent the respiratory paralysis. In case of belladonna poisoning, we use physostigmine in the dose of 0.5 to 2 milligrams intravenously, repeated as required. So physostigmine causes its effect, but some of its side effects like hypotension, arrhythmias and undesirable central effects are also seen. Now, how does these cholinergic drugs have role in Alzheimer's disease? This Alzheimer's disease is a neurodegenerative disease where the cholinergic neurons are primarily affected in the brain, and various measures to augment the cholinergic transmission in the brain are tried, which includes the anticholinesterases like rivastigmine, rolaprazine and galantamine. The symptoms of anticholinesterases poisoning. This is the poisoning where there is overdose or increased dose of the anticholinesterases, where there is exaggerated acetylcholine like effects like irritation of eye, increased secretions leading to lacrimation, salivation, sweating, increased secretion in tracheobronchial tree, then miosis because of the action of sphincter pupillae, blurring of vision, spasm of accommodation, bronchospasm, breathlessness, abdominal colic because of increased peristalsis, involuntary defecation and urination because of its action on trigone and detrusor muscles. It has its effect like fall in blood pressure because of vasodilation, bradycardia or tachycardia depending upon the dose of the drug, cardiac arrhythmias or vascular collapse, muscle fasciculations and respiratory paralysis because of persistent stimulation. Next is irritability or disorientation, unsteadiness and tremor. Now, what is the treatment of these anticholinesterases poisoning? So, main is the termination of exposure to the poison. Expose the patient to fresh air, wash the skin and mucous membrane with the soap and water, as these are the drugs which are absorbed from the skin also. So, wash the skin and mucous membrane with the soap, water, gastric lavage in cases where it is needed. Maintain the airway and positive pressure ventilation if needed, and supportive measures like maintenance of BP, hydration, control of convulsions with the help of diazepam. Now the specific antidote like atropine. So all the cases of anticholinesterases, either carbamate or organophosphates, must be promptly given the atropine in the dose of 2 milligrams intravenously and should be repeated after every 10 minutes till the signs of atropinization are seen like dryness of mouth or mydriasis or hypothermia, and maximum up to 200 milligrams can be given in a day. Now another specific antidote for this anticholinesterase poisoning is the cholinesterase reactivators, that is pralidoxime and obidoxime. These are used to treat the organophosphate poisoning and not the carbamate poisoning. Why? So in case of carbamate poisoning, these carbamates are attached to the anionic site, which is not free for the attachment of the oximes, but in case of organophosphate, these are attached to the esteric site, and so the anionic site is free for the attachment of the oximes. Now these reactivators, that is pralidoxymes are positively charged and they have the attachment at the anionic site. Given because of its attachment to the anionic side, it also reacts with the organophosphates and causing the oxime phosphonate, which diffuses away from the cholinesterase enzyme, leaving the reactivated enzyme back for its action. So given in the dose of 1 to 2 grams slow IV. In children it is given in dose of 20 to 40 milligrams per kg. The another dosing which we use is 30 milligram per kg intravenously as a loading dose, and then it is followed by 8 to 10 milligrams per kg per hour continuous infusion till the recovery is seen. Treatment should be started as early as possible. This is the important point which you should always keep in mind, that the treatment should be started immediately whenever possible before the enzyme, that is the cholinesterase enzyme, is phosphorylated and undergoes aging. Now what is the aging? So aging is the aging of organophosphate, which is caused by the loss of one alkyl group of the phosphorylated enzyme, and then these phosphorylated enzyme becomes resistant for the hydrolysis, thus becomes irreversibly inhibited. So there occurs no reactivation of cholinesterase enzyme. And in case of carbamates, the reactivation of carbamylated enzyme is in less than 30 minutes, which is less than the regeneration time. So there occurs reversible inhibition of cholinesterase. But in case of phosphorylated enzyme, the inhibition of cholinesterase is irreversible, as the regeneration or reactivation of the enzyme does not take place. So always keep in mind the aging should not happen and the treatment should be started as early as possible. So these were the overall discussion on the cholinergic agonist and the anticholinesterases used in the treatment of deficiency of acetylcholine and various conditions where we use these drugs like the cholinergic agonist and the anticholinesterases, which are indirectly acting drugs. In next lecture we will study the anticholinesterases. So here we end the topic. Thank you.